Welcome to the swamp. We're back to the game where the bugs are not just the size of dogs, but the size of cars. Returning to SMALLAND after the launch of the game, I came to see what has changed from the early access. After playing for several more hours to finish the game, I now have a good understanding on the game as a whole. Let's get into it. My name is Excalligator. I rate games based on many categories that would fit into most survival games, based on a 1 to 5 system. If a category does not apply, it will not affect the game's overall score. Now let us get started. SMALLAND is a game where you play as a little fairy creature called small folk, who have emerged from the small caverns under the earth and are learning that the giants of the service have all gone extinct. Since the service is still new to your people, you are one of the pioneers to explore and conquer the beasts that roam the world. But you also need to seek out and learn from those who had merged before you and have mastered the land as well as the various creatures. The character creation is solid and gives you many options to choose from. You can have standard skin colors or even have red, blue, green. You can change the look of your ears to even an almost aquatic-like or elf-like. Changing the antenna shape as well as the color too. I really didn't see many issues with the customization, so I'm gonna give this section a 5 out of 5. The game starts off with a cutscene of the king of the small folk, asking you to find the cure for his sick wife up in the overworld. That is the goal of this game. From there, you emerge from the burrows and are given small tutorials from both NPCs as well as these owl effigies to help give you tips and tricks on playing the game. The small little plateau you start on is a safe place to the start, but once you step outside, the difficulty level spikes drastically as everything wants to eat you alive, and the bugs have high aggro ranges, not to mention they can swarm you in packs. So yeah, you can have a very hard time getting a foothold in this game, especially if you try to run in head first. So I'm going to rate this a 4 out of 5. It's a fine start, but it can be a bit too unforgiving if you're not careful. The exploration is a must, from the main quest taking you all over the world to rare resources that can only be found in certain areas. The center of the map is the lowest level, and the further out you go to the edge of the map, the harder it gets, with the strongest creatures in the game being in the North Desert region. There are some biomes within the map, though it does feel and look a bit different, and it's not always a forest, though forest is what most of the center of the map is. From there, you do have a swamp biome, a jungle, a spooky spider-webbed area, the abandoned park, the desert, and so on. This game does have seasons from spring, summer, fall, and winter, with snow on those winter days. There is an element of danger to exploring, not only from the creatures themselves, but from the occasional rainstorms that can happen. Normal rain doesn't really affect you too much, but every so often a thunderstorm will roll by, and it's treated like the sandstorm in Conan Exiles, where you will need to quickly find shelter or you will take damage. I will say that the one thing I don't like about this map is that there's way too much verticality and water to cross. The map itself is not that large, but simply walking can take you forever just to get from A to B, since you need to traverse under and over so many obstacles. Mounts will make this way more bearable, and it's almost a necessity to traverse. Different mounts have different ways of traversing, from flying bees to jumping grasshoppers, and even geckos that can climb almost any surface. I personally love the grasshopper, as his jump makes the crossing of the land mere seconds. However, there is a risk involved with this, as it's super easy to overshoot your jump and land in the water, which will kill you and your mount. Since the last time I played, I have noticed that mounts have not only been expanded to having new types of bugs to tame, but also they have levels of progression to help give them added health and other stats. But you do have to be careful, as other insects can kill your tames. And as of right now, you can only have one pet at a time, though it is planned for an update to be able to have multiple pets. Though only one will be able to follow you at a time, which is fine by me. I love my grasshopper, but I really want to tame one of those new scorpions, or even a wasp. The last thing I wish to mention is that unfortunately there is no dynamic spawning. The creatures all spawn in the same location every time, and I don't really like that because it gets predictable. All in all, I'm going to rate the exploration a 4 out of 5. You have a want and a need to explore all of the areas, and even revisit them to farm up materials and such. But I reduced the score because of the difficulty in traversing on foot, and even sometimes on mounts. The survival really boils down to a few things. You of course have a food bar. At the start of the game, food you find laying around will hardly give you any hunger points, so cooking your food is a necessity. From there, making dishes will grant you bonuses. I already mentioned the seasons and how it can affect the land through the winter time, so it is something to consider, as the snow will make you want to wear warm clothes and, warming food so you can resist it. The creatures of this land are deadly. All of them have a high aggro range. Even if you outlevel or outgear them, they will still target you, which can be annoying when you just want to get from A to B, but then the little black ants just run at you. It also makes harder areas that you are progressing later in the game very tough to explore or defeat. Not to mention the nighttime also has an increased danger level, as different or even altered creatures will come out. I'm going to rate this section a 4 out of 5. You definitely have the challenge there, and it's not a relaxing game by any means. I've raged many times from dying to stupid shit, but hey, I kept going back for more because it was still fun at times. The building of this game is expansive enough that you can have all the different types of homes, from grass to stone and other types. There is some decorations, but it is limited. The majority of your home will be mostly crafting stations, and luckily since I last played, they have added larger storage boxes, so that's no longer an issue. Your building pieces and stations can take damage if they're not under a roof, so you will have to have a roof. It is mandatory to prevent decay of your building pieces. While there is no official base rating system, if you build your home near an enemy spawn, they will walk over and attack it. Scattered throughout the map, you will find large trees. You will have to do a little bit of a jumping puzzle at first to climb up it. If you manage to climb all the way up to the top, you will have the ability to claim the tree as your home that you can build on top of. Your claim can either be private, or you can allow others to build on it as well. If you decide you want to change what tree you live in, you will have to climb a different tree, of course the first time, and then from there you can unlock like an elevator so it's just faster the next time. But then you can use the totem to transfer your home magically. Granted, no one else has the ownership of the tree beforehand if you are in multiplayer. Everything you built on the tree will transfer over seamlessly. Crafting in this game can be a bit of a hassle, but it is manageable. Items to craft are in small numbers, so don't expect needing hundreds of any item, but in some cases there are some items which require a lot of one item, which at your level of difficulty will be longer to acquire. For example, when you're at the point of making armor that requires chitin, the bugs only drop one at a time, so you will need to kill like 20 or 30 of these certain types of bugs in order to get it. Of course, once you progress past to the next level of difficulty, it is much easier to find chitin, as larger bugs will drop multiple. That is just one example of several. Either way, I didn't find too many issues with the crafting other than the occasional grind for resources. I would say some of the benches feel like bloat that don't really need to exist, especially when they only have like one or two things to make in the station. But overall, it's not too bad. There is no farming, so you cannot recreate plants or anything. So I'm just going to give this section a 4 out of 5. With PvE, it is more involved than just a survival game. You don't just hack and slash your way through the game. Well, technically you can, but you won't get far. Dodging and blocking is very important, as it reduces the oncoming damage by a lot. Enemies can and will hit you like a truck. So managing the timing of attacks, blocks, your energy level is crucial, on top of your weapon types. Sometimes having elemental damage from ranged weapons and other forms of weaponry will be beneficial, though I didn't see much of a reason to change out melee weapon types, and stuck mostly to the scythe, as it's pretty cool and awesome to use. There are no dungeons to explore or delve into, but there are world bosses, most of which you will need to kill for the story progression. But be sure to bring potions, anti-poisons, bandages, and as well as other healing items for yourself to fight through all the tons of creatures. As I mentioned before, all the creatures will aggro you from a decent distance, even if you outlevel them. Speaking of, Now that we actually have levels to grow our character and place attribute points for, you can choose to increase your stats. So that's a great addition. This is a great game for people who want a challenging PvE experience, so I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5. The delivery of this story is fairly standard, as you first start off with a cutscene, followed by quests and dialogue through characters you meet. Aside from that, there is no cutscenes after the fact or any kind of dramatic events that take place. There is some decent level of environmental storytelling if you look hard enough. I feel like giving the score a 3 out of 5. It's enough to get the point across, but it's not really built around being a story-driven game. Now that we got the last section out of the way, the story itself is kind of trash in my opinion. So you are told that the queen is sick and dying, so you need to find a key to a chest to open up for the, the cure. But after going through more than half of the game and like 4 or 5 bosses, you open up the chest to find out that the cure wasn't there. So you must continue on your journey. After finding more clues, you eventually reach the desert where another tribe of small folk have control. They are not friendly at all, but eventually you continue your journey and finish the cure for the queen, and that's it. Not even a proper cutscene or any sort of satisfying ending. I did mention that this game is not really a story-driven game, but that's more so about the survival and the PvE, and it really shows as there's little to no work put into the story at all, which makes it feel really disappointing by the end of it. So I'm gonna rate this section a 2 out of 5. Once the game has concluded, there is really not much else to progress toward unless you want to roleplay, build, and gather all the armors and collectibles. If you are before the ending of the story and are still progressing in the endgame, the progression loop really doesn't change much, though you are in the desert region more often, and I would say the zone itself is cool, but there are a lot of issues I have with the layout of the zone. One being that the way to and from is through an underground path, which is a pain in the ass to do every time because it just takes so much time out of your gameplay to travel from your home to the desert, back through the underground pass again. And if you even try to cross the river without taking the underground path, you will be instantly killed by a bird. So even though my grasshopper could make the jump, the bird just instantly killed me, so I couldn't do that. I have to take the underground path. There is not even a large tree to settle your home in order to reduce the time between your trips to deposit resources. And beyond that, there are a lot of areas where you can fall down into crags and get stuck easily. So I'm gonna rate the endgame a 2 out of 5 for the progression flow as well as the lackluster post-story mode content. A few years ago, this game was in developmental hell, but since the release of the early access, the development has gone so much smoother and regularly updated. There is confirmed post-launch updates in the future, so the game will be something to look forward to. From this recent playthrough, I did not come across any issues from the game, from lag to bugs. Nothing comes to mind from my time playing it, which is a good thing. I will say I think there is an issue with allowing me to record, as the reason why this video took so long, aside from moving, was a lot of my game footage just kept, getting messed up or glitchy. I don't really know how else to describe it, because other games were completely fine. So there might be something wrong there, but that's not really an issue for a normal player. So either way, I'm gonna give the fact that there was no lag and bugs, from my experience at least, a 5 out of 5 for this section. Overall, my score for SMALLAND, the 1.0 launch, is going to be a 3.8 out of 5. While the game has been improved upon with the changes and additions since it first came into the early access, the lackluster story dragged it down a bit, though if it's not that important to you, the game itself, with a solid challenge for players who like more of a hardcore PvE experience, this is really fun, and I recommend it for anyone who wants to try it out. And that is the end of this video. If you liked my review, please subscribe to this channel, as I will be making more in-depth reviews of open-world, sandbox survival RPG games, including those that no one ever talks about from the deepest, darkest depths of Steam. Some games that even look like the muck at the bottom of my pond. If you have any suggestions for what game to do next, please comment below and like this video. Florida Gator Man out.